All right. Hello, FUN3 class. This is Alan, and this is a video tutorial on how to make a button in processing. So in Scratch and even in Java blocks, making a button is a fairly trivial matter. We can make a sprite, we can give that sprite shape, and then we can give that sprite the either when clicked block, or we can have it detect when it's been clicked in Java blocks. But doing it in processing is a little bit more of a time commitment and an effort commitment because we don't have sprites anymore. We have to do it ourselves. So it's a very important thing to learn how to do, but it's not necessarily the easiest thing to do. So we're going to be practicing doing that, and it's going to be very, very useful later on down the line when we want to do other things that have detection if they're being touched or if they're colliding with something else. So we're going to begin like we always do. I'm going to make my global variables section. I'm going to make my void setup. And I'm going to make my void draw. Perfect. So to make a button, we need to first think about what does a button need? Well, there's sort of two sides to a button. A button has its physical manifestation, or if that's a little too high-tech to speak for you, we have what it looks like, and then we have what it does. And we need to program both of those things sort of independently and then at the end mesh them together. So let's start by making the physical part of our button, the thing that we can see, the thing that we aim our mouse towards, what it looks like in our canvas. So in my void setup, first I'm going to go ahead and make my size. We're just going to have a relatively small screen this time. I'll just do 600 by 600. And then in my draw, I'll go ahead and have a background of 255. Just a nice white background to start. We might change that later, but let's not worry about it too much. So our button in this case is going to be a square or a rectangular button. So if we want to make a square or rectangular button, we need to have variables that control its squareness and rectangularness and its position. So we're going to go ahead and make a couple variables. I'm going to start by making, we're going to have an int x, and we'll start that equal. Let's have our button start off in the middle of my screen. So my size is 600, so I'm going to say x equals 300. And int y, we're also going to have that equal 300. And then int w for width, let's go ahead and have that be, I don't know, how wide should we make it? Let's do it 100. And then int h for height, we're also going to make that 100. So we've got our position and we've got our width and our height. It's going to be a square button for me. You guys can go ahead and make it whatever shape you like, or rather whatever dimensions you like. I will request that you make it a rectangular button for this class. We can make circular buttons later, but the way we detect if it's been clicked is a little bit different, so I don't want to dive into something that we haven't done that I'm not going to be teaching because it's going to be a little bit different, and you can ask me about it in class, but let's not worry about it for the time being. So let's do the most basic thing and let's draw our rectangle. So remember, to draw the rectangle, we type rect, open parentheses, and we have our variables already set up. So instead of typing numbers in here, we're just going to type our variables. Our rect is going to be located at x, y, and it's going to be width by height. Go ahead and close that off with a semicolon, and I'll go ahead and run it. And boom, I have my rectangle. My rectangle is here. It doesn't quite look in the center, right? So we actually want to fix that a little bit. I'm going to go to my void setup, and I'm going to type in another line of code. This is going to be rect mode, open parentheses, center in all caps. The reason I'm doing this is it changes how processing draws rectangles. Right now, let me go ahead and open up Paint so I can show you guys what I'm talking about here. Right now, if we want to draw a rectangle, we give it an X or a Y position. So let's say we give it an X or a Y position of 100 by 100. Sure, that's the X and the Y position of this dot. And then we tell it to draw a rectangle. It starts from that corner and then goes out by whatever the width is and goes down by whatever the height is. So it starts from the corner, the upper left-hand corner, and it draws out. But what we want to do instead is have it start from the middle. So what we want instead is to have this rectangle here again. This will be at 100, 100. And then we want the rectangle to be drawn this way, like this, and that will be the width, and like this, that will be the height. And then we want the rectangle to be sort of drawn around it, like that. Pretend that's in the middle. Promise me. So this is what happens when we type rect mode center. It says that the X and Y position of our rectangle is actually the middle of the rectangle, and we draw the width and the height out from there. It doesn't change the shape of it, it just changes its relative position. And it's very useful. So I'm going to put rect mode center, I'm going to rerun this, and boom, my rectangle is now perfectly in the center of my screen. And that's exactly what I want to have happen. So this is a button after all, so we can go ahead and make it look a little bit more buttony. I'll put a fill command. I've always been a fan of the big red button, so I'm going to do like 150, 0, 0. Got a nice big red button. Maybe I want my button to have a nice sort of cartoony outline to it. So I'm also going to say stroke weight. Stroke weight is a command that changes how thick the outline of your shapes is. So right now I think it's set to the default of 1. I'm going to make it like 5. Let's see how that looks. Stroke weight of 5. There we go. It's got a nice bold outline, a nice red color. We have our button. If you like, you can put text on your button. Maybe I'll do a new fill. Remember, text takes fill to have a different color. Right now, it would just be red on red, which is not what we want. And then I'll go ahead and do a text, and I'll have it say, do not push. And I will draw this at, my X is 300, my Y is 300, so I'll draw it at the same place, 300, 300. Go ahead and close it off with a semicolon. So it doesn't quite work. We have the same issue with our text as we did with our rectangle. It's drawing from the corner but expanding out to the left and down. Instead, we wanted it to be centered around that point. So what I can do again is underneath rect mode center, I'm going to type text align center. Whoops, center. So this is going to have my text align to these positions so that this is always in the middle of the text. So if I redraw this, boom, do not push right in the middle of my button. This looks beautiful. Nothing says push me like a button that says do not push. That's bright red, right? Okay. So we've got our button. It says do not push. So we can go ahead and check off that first step of what we wanted to do, and that is have the physical part of our button. So the next part is we need to have something happen as far as a way to detect if we have clicked the button. So I'm going to go down, and we're done with our void draw for the time being. We're going to come back to it, but we're going to make a new function, and this is going to be a function that will check to see if the mouse has been clicked. So what we're going to do is we're going to do void mouse pressed. Open and close parentheses, open curly brackets. So this function is a function that only happens when the mouse is pressed, when we click down on the mouse button. Anything inside this block of code will automatically happen. But that's not quite what we want, right? If we click up here to the left of the button, we don't want anything to happen. We only want something to happen if we click on the button itself. So we need to add some parameters to this. So I'm going to say inside my void mouse press, I'm going to make a check that says, oops, let's click over here, that says if my mouse's X position is within this range. So I'm going to go back to my paint tool for a quick second. So here we have our button. We drew it at 100, 100, and let's say we made our width by 50. So go ahead and say, where'd my mouse go? Come on, there it is. It really gets hidden. There we go. Okay. Now I see it. Okay, so we're going to say this whole width of the button is 50, and the whole height of the button is also 50. So we want to check to see if our mouse is within this button. So if the center of the button is 100, 100, and the whole length is 50, that means at the halfway point, this distance here is 25. Oh, come on. And this distance here is also 25. Likewise, this distance here is 25, and this distance here is 25. So what's the x position of this part of the line, of this line of my button? Well, if the center is 100 and we're going back 25, this line here is at x equals 75. Likewise, the outer end over here, this line, is at 100 plus 25. So it's going to be at 125. So we need to see if our mouse is between 75 and 125, then we know we've clicked it, at least as far as left-right is concerned. We need to do the exact same thing, but this time for the y as well. So up here, this is going to be 75 in the y, and down here, this is going to be 125 in the y. So we need to check to see, oh, that should be a y. So we need to check and see if our mouse is between these 2 points as well. So it's going to be two conditionals, one hiding inside the other. That's going to check to see if our mouse is between these two values. So let's go ahead and write that into our code. So we're going to say if mouse x, remember that is the keyword that always maps to your mouse's current x position. If mouse x is greater than 75, and mouse x is less than 125, then we know we're clicking somewhere in this column here. We don't know about the y yet, but we do know about the x. So I'm going to open a curly bracket and make another conditional. This one's going to say if mouse y is greater than 75 and mouse y is less than 125, I'll make another curly bracket. So what we've done now is we have two conditionals. The first one says, am I inside this column? And the second one says, am I inside this row? If both of those are true, that means I must be inside my button. And we can go ahead and test this by just having something simple. I'll just have like print line, you clicked me, and put a semicolon in there. So when I run this, I click out here. Oh, ha ha ha, my bad. So I put it in the wrong place. Our button is at 300, 300, 100, 100. So we actually need to make a few adjustments. So instead of 100, 100, this is 300, and the width and the height is 100. So it's actually going to be this distance here is 50, 50, 50, 50, and this is 300, 300. So actually we need to have this be 300 minus 50. That's 250, 300 plus 50, 350, and this is again 250, 350. So let's go ahead and make those adjustments. My mistake. So less than is greater than 250, less than 350, less than 350, greater than 250. All right. I also misspelled clicked. Let's go ahead and fix that as well. Okay. So now I click somewhere that's not the button. Nothing happens. I click the button and it says, you clicked me. Again, not the button. Nothing happens. Button gives me an alert that says I clicked it. Perfect. So this is exactly what I wanted to have happen. We are in good shape. So yeah, we've pretty much built our button. You guys can sort of assign your button to do whatever you want. In this case, let's just go ahead and have a little bit of fun with this now that we have our button and our button works. I'm going to assign some variables to the background to represent the colors of my background. So I'm going to go back up to my global variables, and I'm going to make a int r equal 255, int b, or g, equal 255, and int b equal 255. And I'm going to have my color, my background color, start off as RGB. And then when I click the mouse, I want my background color to change to a random color. So all I do there is say R equals int random 255. I'm going to copy this, and I'll paste it and paste it. And instead of R, this time I will say G, and this time I'll say B. Whoops. And I'll go ahead and run this again. So every time I click the mouse, my background color is going to change. Awesome. So what else could we have it do? What about if we wanted to have our button move around our page when we click on it? Well, it seems simple at first. We just need to change what X and Y is, right? Kind of, but it's actually not that simple. So let's go ahead and see what happens when I do that. So I'll say X equals int random some value between 0 and the width of my screen. And I'll say Y equals the integer of, oh, I should probably spell random correctly. That would be helpful. The height of my screen. Okay, so I'll go ahead and hit click and hit run. So my button's there. I click it. So first of all, do not push did not follow my mouse. It stayed exactly where it was. Also, when I click on the new location of the button, nothing happens. And if I click where the button isn't, but where it used to be, it'll continue to teleport. So when we move our button, we can't just move the rectangle that the button represents. We also have to represent the click zone, which is the area that we can click to make the button work, and we have to move the text. So we can leave this the way it is. We just have to go back and change a few variables. So for example, our text that says do not push, instead of having it at 300, 300, we're going to have it at X, Y. So that should fix the first problem. The text now moves with the button, but the button click location still hangs out here in the middle. So we got to fix that as well. To do that, it's a little bit trickier. I'm going to go to these conditionals and see where I wrote 255, 355, 255, 355. Well, the way we got that is it's the X location minus the width of the shape divided by 2, and then the X location plus the width divided by 2. So we need to make some adjustments here as well to actually represent this. So instead of having 255, I'm going to say X minus, open parentheses, W divided by 2. And then here, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to say X plus W divided by 2. And I can do the same thing down here. I'm going to say Y plus H divided by 2. And here I'm going to say Y minus H divided by 2. So with all of that done, I should now have a button that has a moving click zone, a moving rectangle, and a moving text. And there we go. So this sort of shows you guys, I think, a pretty clear way that making something simple is pretty simple. But the moment you add complexity, the complexity sort of expands out throughout the whole code. Having a rectangle in the middle of our square that says push me is very easy to do. We don't need anything with the mouse pressed. We don't need any of these variables in our global variable section. All we need is our setup to say size and our draw to say make a rectangle and write do not push on it. But if we want to have it be clickable, if we want to have it be able to move, we could also have it change shape. We could do a whole bunch of different things. But with each stage that we add a new function, we also need to go back and change everything else so that those functions will work. When we start doing programming in a more complicated way, this is going to be a very, very common problem where you'll want to add something that you think is small to your game or to your program, but it turns out the work required is going to be actually quite a bit longer. So it's just something to keep in mind. Nothing is ever quite as straightforward as you hope it will be. But if you put the work in, it often ends up pretty cool. Well, that is it for this tutorial. If you fell off and missed something, feel free to go back through the video and rewatch the part that you got confused by. Also, if you have any questions, feel free to stop by office hours. They happen every day. The hours are on our website, or you can drop me an email at alan@ktbyte.com, and I'll get back to you as quickly as I can. But I will say that's pretty good. Good luck, and I'll see you next class. Bye.